Hey there fellow hunters, welcome back to the channel. I'm Blaze. In this video I'm going to do something a little bit different, as I made hammer and I've picked up a few things since playing it, and I've never done any type of tutorial like at all, so I'm going to do exactly that. I'm going to go over a few of the some of the basics of the hammer, skills you should and shouldn't be using, and I'll also go over my play style. My play style is based solely around solo hunting. You could probably use it in multiplayer, because it's hammer. Uh, you should be going for the head in even in multiplayer, unless you get better hit zones on anywhere else, which you probably don't. And you'll always you'll get KOs from going to the head, which are great, not perfect opportunities for damage. So always go for the head if you're playing hammer or any other blunt weapon, which I think there's only two of them, and that's hunting horn and hammer. But anyways, when it comes to hammer, though, a lot of people look at it and be like, man, that's slow and sluggish. But it's really not. I'm going to try and make this quick. As you probably heard in the background, I got thunder rolling in, so that means power might go out, especially where I live. So we're going to try and make this as quick as I can. But a lot of people think that the hammer is really slow and sluggish, when in reality it's not that bad. I consider it to be the most balanced between speed and damage out of all the weapons out there, because anything that moves quicker than the hammer doesn't do as much damage, and anything that does more damage than the hammer doesn't move as quick. Now, the only real exception to that I noticed is probably the charge blade, because you can go into sword mode and move around and instantly switch to axe mode. So you can use your sword mode as sort of a repositioning device. Whereas hammer, you're just stuck with the hammer. Alright. So let's go ahead and get into the basic skills that I consider are needed for hammer, and some skills that are not needed for a hammer but complement it very well. Now, I'll go ahead and let's see here. I'll go ahead and pull this build up. Now this build runs crit I 7, agitator 7, attack 4, health boost 3, crit boost 3, weakness exploit 3, airborne, slider, and fortify. Now, I always run fortify because I suck. I mean, I'm really bad at iframing. I get hit a lot. So I'm going to cart. And I'm pretty sure a lot of you out there are going to cart. This is probably the strongest skill per decoration slot that you can get in the game, because for just one skill slot, one decoration slot, you can get a 20% increase and a 30% increase in defense and attack. 20% increase in attack and 30% increase in defense when it's maximum, and it stacks twice. So, and that's just from carting. I can't think of another skill that that rewards you for carting or playing sloppy, other than maybe resentment. I think resentment is also another skill that I personally like to use because it complements my crappy play. But fortify is probably the strongest single decoration slot skill you can find in the game that will increase your damage, better than any other skill in the game, period. For just one single decoration slot. Can't beat it. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about the regular skills that I consider required for your hammer. And that would be Crit Eye. That is your main one. Bam, Crit Eye. That is going to increase your affinity, period. And you want to max that baby out before anything else. Another one I consider absolutely mandatory is your attack boost 4. Only go for 4. Don't try to max it out unless you've got everything else in the build figured out. If you've got room in your build after you're done making it to put to increase it past 4, feel free to do it. But make sure that you've got everything else in your build before you go past 4, because it hasn't been updated since the beginning of the game, period. Once, when they released the game, this is how the skill looked. That. It hasn't increased, even though our weapons base damage has increased significantly. The percentage of damage increase that you get from attack boost 7 is not great. Which is why a lot of people switch to using other ways of increasing your raw attack, like Agitator or Peak Performance, or in my case, Resentment. Those are much better at increasing your attack than what actual attack boost is. So only go for 4. Another skill that I consider absolutely necessary for your hammer build is crit boost and weakness exploit. I consider those absolute mandatory. I put them in my build no matter what. Along with, and a lot of people might disagree with me, but you can't beat 30% extra damage, especially if you play the way I do from the airborne skill. I do a lot of ledge hopping, and those ledge hops are considered air attacks. They get the extra damage from the 30%. So I put it in my build above, before anything else, along with affinity sliding. All you have to do is slide a little bit, and bam, you get 30% affinity for, I think it's like 12 seconds. And that is a tremendous increase in affinity. And if you're sliding around a lot, or if you're in an area where it's got lots of hills that you can slide down, 30% affinity can be the difference between hitting a crit and not hitting a crit. And that's where your biggest damage is going to come from, is landing those crits. So if you have the space for affinity sliding, which you should, because if you're running hammer, you should probably run it, because that spinning air bludgeon is going to be a really good damage dealer, especially if you're trying to reach a tall monster's head and you can't quite get to it from the ground, which is also where airborne comes into play. Excuse me. Now, those are the skills that I consider absolutely necessary for your hammer. Now, a lot of people are like, well, where's Slugger? We'll get to that. Now, the skills that are not absolutely necessary for your hammer, but really do help your build if you can squeeze them in, is, as you can see, is Agitator. Not necessary, because it can be, you don't have to have Agitator. You can go with, Resentment or Peak Performance to, boost that damage up. Heck, you can even mix and match. You can go with Peak Performance and Agitator, or you can go with Peak Performance with Resentment. That way, if Peak Performance isn't activated, Resentment is, or if Resentment isn't activated, Peak Performance might be. So, there are some of those skills that complement each other that you can squeeze into a build if you can squeeze it in. Like I said, it's not necessarily mandatory to have it in, but it does help. And that's along with the skill that I just mentioned a minute ago. This one right... Where is it? Oh, there we go. Right there. Slugger. Not necessary. Helps because it helps you get those KOs quicker. It don't help you with them getting more of them. You won't get more KOs. You won't. You'll get those same KOs faster. Because by the time you get any more KOs, the monster would be dead. You would have dealt enough damage to kill the monster. So you'll get those same KOs, but you'll get them quicker. To me, it's not a mandatory skill because the hammer already does tremendous KO damage. I mean, brutal KO damage. But it does help because, especially when you're trying to speedrun, it lets you get those KOs quicker, meaning you can get, those down, that knockdown damage more, earlier in the hunt than you normally would. But like I said, it's not mandatory for your build. Another skill that's really helpful but not mandatory, especially if you want to try and get 100% affinity without using weakness exploit, which I don't know why you would, but it can also be used in conjunction with weakness exploit, especially if you can't quite reach 100% affinity with weakness exploit and your critical eye. You can use max might. On the contrary, after they updated it and made max might secret, they nerfed the piss out of it. So if you are going to use max might, only go for secret, because if you use maximum might and not use max might secret, you're not going to get any of that affinity, because charging your hammer uses stamina, so you're not going to get that affinity boost hardly at all unless you're running max might secret. Now if you're running max might secret, which is exactly how it used to be before they updated it, you get the affinity as soon as the stamina gauge is full. Which, if you notice, let me run over to the monster thingy over here. If you notice, watch my stamina gauge. As soon as I let go, it goes right back to full. Now on Max Might Secret, that final slam gets the extra affinity from Max Might. But if you're not running Secret, none of these hits get Max Might. None of them. And you'll notice that I have time to pick the hammer back up before Max Might even activates. So, unless you're running Max Might Secret, don't put it in. Don't. Just don't. It's not worth it unless you put Max Might Secret. Another really, really nice skill to have for your hammer that's not necessarily mandatory for your build is Part Breaker. If you can squeeze in Part Breaker, and you probably noticed that a lot of times when you do break apart on a monster, it falls over, or it flinches, or it gives you a window to attack. So if you can break those parts quicker, you get more chances of dealing even more damage. So Part Breaker is a really helpful skill. I wouldn't call it mandatory, but it's just like your KO. It's gonna it's going to help. Another really good one is evade window. And a lot of people, and I think it's an overlooked skill. I know, I think Gun Lance is, I know Ruriken preaches evade window and the evade distance or whatever it is. But evade window for hammer isn't mandatory, but it does help, especially if you're not really good at iframing. If you're not real good at iframing, that evade window can help you avoid getting hit. But like I said, it's not a mandatory skill that I would consider, necessary for your build, but it does help. And that goes with resentment and peak performance. They're not absolutely necessary, but they help. They give you extra damage under certain circumstances. Me, I'm a lazy hunter, and I'm probably not the only one that's a lazy hunter. I don't like situational attack boosts. It's why I don't even bother with latent power. As strong as it can be, latent power is just poop on trying to activate it. So now skills that you shouldn't be ever using in your hammer are probably obvious. Like let's see here. Everyone knows you don't need that for hammer. You don't need that for hammer. You really don't need much. There are certain skills that you could say they're not necessary for hammer, or at least they don't affect hammer at all. Now another thing I consider don't even bother with is trying to run critical element or just element hammer in general. That's not really what the hammer is built for, even though they do put element hammers into the game, especially with the latest update with the Frostfang Barryout. They added the Polaris Bash, which deals decent damage, has purple sharpness, only a little bit with some room to grow. Good affinity, and probably some of the best element damage I've seen on a hammer. But the problem with that is that close melee weapons and they get their element added to it's like every third hit or so. So you have to swing your hammer 3 times before it even applies element damage. So the hammer, in my opinion, is far too slow to run an element hammer, to run an element damage set. You can. I'm not trying to say, tell you how to play or anything like that. I'm just saying it's not what you really should be looking at. If you want to run an element, trust me, choose a different weapon. You're going to have a better time with it. Even though this hammer does have really nice element on it, I wouldn't recommend running element hammer. Just like crit element or anything element really. Because it not only changes what skills you should be putting in your build, it also changes your play style, which we'll go ahead and go over how I play my hammer. If you've watched any of my other videos, you'll notice that I particularly lean towards an aerial style of hammer, which is why I say Airborne and Slider are practically mandatory, because you're going to deal tons and tons of damage. Because if you can, with affinity sliding, you get that extra 30%. Look at that, 100% affinity. So that means every one of those attacks were guaranteed crits. Bam. Now say if I have a hill, that's exactly what I go for, because that entire spinning attack that I was doing, it does mount damage, which only if I'm remembering this correctly, the only attacks that do mount damage are considered aerial attacks. So they get, all those attacks get the increase, the 30% increase from airborne, along with my favorite way of doing it, and that is this: ledge hops. Now, to do a ledge hop, you want to roll towards the ledge, hop, pull your trigger, or the charge trigger. On Xbox it's the right trigger. On PS4 I'm not sure what it is because I don't have a PS4. But you roll towards, get in the air, and swing your hammer with the trigger. Now, once you get pretty good at it, you can use that to pull yourself back over to the ledge by pushing your joystick towards the ledge when you charge, because that actual charging motion gives you forward momentum. Don't know how, but it does. So you can keep on doing this and spamming the crap out of it, and this will do tremendous damage to a monster. It also gets all the it gets the 30% damage bonus from airborne, and it can absolutely wreck a monster like that. Now, say you don't have any hill to slide on or any ledge to hop up of. How are you going to play? Well, the way I do it is I'll get my hammer and I'll run up and I'll do this. Bam. Boom. Bam. That's my favorite combo to use because, one, it keeps weakness exploit active, and it does a ton of damage. And if you can get your claw to latch onto the head for that, it's a really good way of getting KOs. Now, say you did that and you KO'd a monster. Well, the attack that you're going to want to lean towards is you'll either want to do this move, where you swing it and do your standard combos like that over and over again while the monster's down, or you can do the heavier damaging move, the Big Bang combo. So you'll want to make sure your hammer is power charged and go up to the monster while he's squiggling there on the ground with his head completely exposed, which is the greatest thing in the world, and just keep tapping your B button, or I think it's the circle button on the PS4, and you just keep tapping this B button and you'll go into the Big Bang combo, and the more you tap it, you'll end up with the Big Bang finisher. Now, one little tip: after you get that Big Bang finisher, because that last swing is really time consuming, it has a really long animation for it, and that while you're finishing up the monster might be getting up and getting ready to attack you while you're finishing that move, and if it doesn't flinch the monster or knock him back down, you're probably going to get hit unless you've got the temporal mantle on or the rock steady mantle on. So what you're going to want to do is, say you're winding it up and you get into this and he's about to attack you, you can tap the A button and it gets you out of that animation quicker. And you can pretty much do that with any of the any of the said hammer slams. Like, say we go with this one. Say you don't do the claw attack, you can roll out of it instead of Now I'll show you the animation without rolling. Think, look how long it takes for you to get out of that animation. So, your best bet is to roll after practically every attack, because that gets you, better, quicker damage, because you can go back to attacking faster and you don't have to wait for an animation to finish up. So, and that can be done after practically every single final attack in a combo. It lets you get back to attacking faster. So that's pretty much all I've got for you guys. This is the first tutorial that I've really ever done. So I hope I gave some good information. And man, that's starting to sound bad out there. So I hope I gave some good information, and I hope my power doesn't go out. But I hope I taught you guys something, or maybe you're just picking up the hammer for the first time and you're looking for something that's not super in-depth, but gives you a really good basic grasp of how using a hammer, what it's like, and letting you get around some of the misconceptions that come with a big, giant, hard-hitting weapon like the hammer is. A lot of people, like I said, think it's a really slow and lumbering weapon, and it can be if you're not really sure on how to use it. But as you're charging, you notice I'm running around pretty dang quick. I guarantee you that having the charge blade in axe mode, you're not going to run around as quick. And or the big sword, the great sword. There we go. I hardly ever use that. I think I've got like 8 hunts with one. But that great sword, it walks like this when you've got the weapon out. I mean, this fast. When you've got your weapon out, you literally have to, you have to sheath your weapon to even move. So, with the hammer, you can run around with it fairly easily, with it out and charged, and you can still roll with it charged, with the power charge on. Now, if you roll, it'll reset the actual triple charge. So if you it's very, especially if you can get the timing of your roll down after each big hammer swing, or and stuff like that, you can maneuver and move around really quick. I mean, not as quick as, say, dual blades or the bow or a quicker weapon, but you're going to have a lot more maneuverability than a lot of people would think coming from a big lumbering hammer. Like I said, I think I said it earlier in the video, anything that hits harder than the hammer doesn't move as quick, and anything that moves faster than the hammer doesn't hit as hard. So I think the hammer's a really good balance between the two, and I think Capcom actually did a really good job on hammer. So I hope you guys really learned something. Like I said, I've never done a tutorial before, and this video is starting to get to a half hour long, and I need to quit it. But I hope you guys learned something, and I hope I didn't do too bad of a job on conveying information to you guys. If I missed anything, make sure you guys put it in the comments, and if it's good, I'll pin it. That way, they see that first, and or I'll leave an annotation down in the comments on one of my own comments adding any information that I might have missed in the video. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you made it this far, like the video, subscribe maybe. That helps, the YouTube algorithm get my videos out there, which it's been doing a pretty good job. So I will see you guys in the next video, and happy hunting.